About 10 days since we wished a lot of persons Happy New Year, and since a lot of persons also wished us a very Happy New Year. I don't think many of us have stepped back and reflected on what is a Happy New Year. What makes a New Year happy? What is happiness? Because that is the question that is central. It's almost become a calendar item. Beginning of a calendar year, you shoot out Happy New Year messages, but I don't think we reflect on what that means. So let's share some thoughts on this. The first is that happiness is to be distinguished from pleasure. A lot of us think that if there is momentary pleasure, we are happy. Give a child a chocolate, the child beams, has that chocolate, spreads a lot of joy and cheer. But is that child happy? For the moment, that child is definitely pleased, and then something happens and that pleasure disappears, and then you will hear either a long wail or an agitated cry, or maybe some other even more serious expression of unhappiness. So that's transient. That's passing. That is pleasure. That's not happiness. What we also need to realize is that happiness is entirely in our own hands. We got to define happiness in the manner in which it makes meaning for us. If we start looking at dictionary definitions of happiness, if we reach out to Google to figure out what is happiness, I think we will be barking up the wrong tree. So let's see how to be happy, because that's the central question. Can we be happy? Let's make an effort. First, let us distinguish between hopes and expectations. All of us have hopes of being the best and the brightest in whatever we do or whatever we want to do. Clearly, there is no room for all of us, because there's room only for one or maybe a handful of people at the top if you want to be the best and the brightest. Are those the happiest people? I'm not so sure, because we are seeking to measure happiness in terms of our hopes and the way they either materialize or don't materialize. As against that, it's legitimate to have expectations. It's legitimate to think in terms of what I can achieve, what on a normal day it is realistic for me to assume that can happen. And if my happiness is predicated on measuring up to expectations that I have of myself and that those that I live with have of me, clearly I am on the path to happiness even if I haven't reached there yet. So don't go by hopes. Hopes are aspirational. There is nothing wrong with aspiring. There is nothing wrong with being ambitious. But if that is going to be the measure of your success and failure, clearly you're creating a problem that does not exist. So distinguish between hopes and expectations. The line that distinguishes them should not get blurred. The next is the problem that the Americans have had. And they've had this problem since independence, because the American Declaration of Independence sets out three things: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You get the impression, if you try to reduce it to a picture or a diagram, that the Americans are running a race towards a target called happiness. They are in pursuit of happiness. Happiness is running ahead of them and they are in pursuit. The natural conclusion is that they're not happy because they haven't reached there yet and happiness is still ahead of them. Don't be in pursuit of happiness. Be happy at who you are, at what you have accomplished, at your present station in life, and don't get into this trap of somebody is doing better than me, because When you talk in terms of the pursuit of happiness, when you talk in terms of comparisons, and comparisons are necessarily odious, they bring a bad smell. When you think on those lines, you are bringing unhappiness on yourself. You are inflicting sorrow on yourself. You are inflicting sadness on yourself. And I think that's not very fair to who you are, what you've done, what you have achieved. Don't get into the business of comparison. More importantly, don't confuse happiness with material accomplishments. I have a small car today. I will buy a bigger car tomorrow and I'll be happy. No, the car will take you from the same place to the same place. Maybe it's a little more comfortable inside. That gives you comfort. That doesn't give you happiness. When you step off the car, you're just the same as if you had stepped off a small car. So the big car doesn't give you happiness. There are several such things which are material, which are here today, gone tomorrow. At least the importance, the significance of that goes away. And if you think that that is going to add to your happiness, clearly you're mistaken. And that mistake is something that you need to address. The corollary is, don't keep focusing on your failures, your regrets, your lack of accomplishments. Everyone has those problems. When we set out in the morning, there are some things you want to do, you don't end up doing some of them. Does it mean you're a failure in life? You're not. Does it mean that you bought yourself a one-way ticket to unhappiness? No, it shouldn't be that. Yeah, it hasn't happened. Sometimes these things don't happen. Maybe there is a tomorrow when you can not just complete it but do a better job of it. There's a positive way of looking at that. But many of us practice victimhood as if it is a perfect science. We want to be central to the problems of the universe, believe that it is on our shoulders that these problems rest, and if we can't fix them, then clearly we are failures, and if we are failures, we have no right to be happy. I think this is a package that is best thrown wherever it will not come back into your lives. Because if this clings on to you, or more importantly, if you cling on to this package, you're not going to see happiness, you're not going to experience happiness. I don't think you should focus on that. There is an excellent line about the furrows on your brow, the lines that are there on your forehead. It is those furrows that keep deepening if you keep happiness at a distance and invite sorrow and sadness and unhappiness into your lives. Surely you can do better than that. You focus on the bright spots, focus on the strengths, focus on the achievements, focus on the small gains you have made, however temporary. And that is the way to be happy, not the pursuit of happiness. It's not that by doing it you're running a race. No. Stand where you are, experience the sights and sounds around you, and then be happy in your present context. Because if you are not, you have only one life to live and you're living it suboptimally. That's not something you should do. The other thing is to think, why are these problems happening only to me and why to no one else? You can do no better than think of the story of Arthur Ashe, the famous tennis player of the United States. At the height of his career or shortly thereafter, he went in for a surgery and was given a blood transfusion. The blood was infected. He got HIV/AIDS. And a lot of people wrote to him saying, Arthur, you're such a good man. Yes, he was a good man. He did good deeds. He was an ambassador for some of the values that humankind values. And yet, he got HIV/AIDS. And one of them said, why did it have to be you? God should have chosen someone else. And his answer is one for the ages. It's one that we need to understand, to absorb. He said 5 million people started out playing tennis. 500,000 learned the game. 50,000 people got to play in tournaments. 5,000 played in the list A tournaments. 50 qualified for Wimbledon. 4 made the semi-finals. I held a cup in my hands. At none of those stages did I ask myself, why me? Why did God choose me? What right do I have to ask God now, why did you choose me? There will be setbacks. Set off those setbacks against your successes, against your gains, against your accomplishments, and then you will realize these are mere punctuation marks in a life packed with happiness. At the end, it is about you. It is about your wanting to be happy. It is about your doing the things that need to make you happy. It is about your doing the things that make everyone around you happy, so that that happiness rubs off on you. That's the challenge that you must set yourself in 2023. Take some of those New Year cards that you've received. Look at what they say. They are exhorting you to be happy this year. They're not just wishing you a happy new year. They're saying, please work on making this new year a happy new year. Let me at the end wish you an enriching and a rewarding new year, and certainly one that is full of happiness. Thank you.